Welcome, everyone. This is the COVID-19 Paycheck Protection Program Ppp Forgiveness Update webinar. We thank you for being here with us today. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Byron Hicks, State Director of the Small Business and Technology Development Center. Byron Hicks was named the State Director in January of 2021, and he also serves as the Assistant Vice Chancellor of Business and Technology Extension Programs for the Office of External Affairs, Partnerships, and Economic Development at NC State University. The Sbtdc is the Business and Technology Extension of the University of North Carolina system. For over 36 years, the Sbtdc has been a resource for business owners, providing confidential counseling, educational programs, and a connection to the university resources to help make their businesses better. The Sbtdc operates 10 regional centers across the state that are hosted by our UNC system campuses, with 16 offices serving all 100 North Carolina counties. Business resiliency counselors are now embedded with each of our regional centers. Our Business Recovery and Resiliency Program is a CARES Act funded initiative that expands the Sbtdc's capacity to assist businesses during the COVID-19 crisis. It's my privilege to introduce Mike Arriola, the Acting Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration's North Carolina District Office. As Acting Director, Mike Arriola oversees an office that drives economic development by assisting local entrepreneurs with starting and growing businesses. He also directs the implementation of SBA programs related to accessing capital, business advising, and government contracts.
Thank you so much, Bob. And thanks also to Byron for hosting us and the other folks at the Sbtdc. Joining me today are Walter Lara Figueroa, our Lender Relations Specialist, and Karen Hoskins, our lead lender relations specialist, who are going to be doing the presentation as well as helping with some Q&A towards the end of our session. And also with me is our lead economic development specialist, Eileen Joyce, who will be working feverishly behind the scenes, making sure things go smoothly. Just by way of background, the SBA, of course, is a US government agency, and our mission is to help Americans start, develop, and succeed in business through our 4 basic programs, those being access to capital, government procurement certification programs, counseling and training, and also direct disaster assistance. Today is the 4th in a series of sessions we're doing in partnership with our friends at the Sbtdc. And today's webinar session will focus on the Ppp Forgiveness Process. The whole idea of getting a PPP loan is so that all of it will be forgiven by the US government, so that that will enable folks to recover a little bit more swiftly, considering the after effects of the pandemic that we're going through. And so with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Karen and Walter to get our slide presentation done. We'll do that for about maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A. So Karen and Walter, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. I apologize. Anyway, I'm Karen Hoskins, and these are the first few slides we're going to cover. The idle advances are no longer deducted from PPP forgiveness payments. That was a huge adjustment and change when the new bill was signed. And all borrowers can now choose either an 8-week, anytime from 8-week through 24-week covered period. So that also is an addition. And borrowers who returned all or part of their PPP loan can reapply. However, I will note that there are stipulations for certain types of businesses and situations that are allowed to do that. And we can always work with you if you fall into one of those buckets. There is expanded eligibility and forgiveness expenses, which we'll cover in a minute. Your PPP first draw forgiveness money is not going to be included in your borrower's gross receipts for when and if you apply for a second draw loan. So that's a nice feature also. And PPP loans are now officially not taxable income, and expenses paid with PPP loan funds are now tax deductible. So you will want to consult with the IRS or your tax tax preparers for further details, but that was a wonderful addition and relieved a lot of people when that came into play. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick recap, just to remind everybody, this is the payroll paycheck, I always call it payroll, Paycheck Protection Program. So we do, you know, hopefully you will be able to spend at least 60% on payroll. If you cannot make that 60% mark, maybe you fall short in your 55%, that's okay, but you will get your loan amount reduced. So ideally, you want to strive for 60%, and you could certainly go all the way up to 100%. You could spend every bit on that. At most, you want to spend 40%. That is where you have a hard fast. You can't go over 40% on your non-payroll costs. And those include your various things such as rent, mortgage interest, not the principal, but the interest, and utility payments, your various, you know, electricity, gas, water, transportation, telephone, etc. And we've added 4 new categories also with the new bill, and that is, we'll cover in more detail, but they're for operational expenses, property damage costs, supplier costs, and worker protection expenditures. So next slide. So let's go over what these new expandable expenses are. Your operation costs, that's just additional expenses that you may have spent for various things such as software, cloud computing, and other human resources for accounting, particularly for accounting needs. Property damage, that's an interesting one that comes into play, and that has to do with the public disturbances that occurred during 2020, the various riots in certain cities. And some of those costs were not all covered, damage costs were not maybe all covered by your insurance. So any of those that were not covered by insurance, you will be able to also claim as an expense. Supplier costs, that's sort of a catch-all, and it's got a lot of various different things in there, such as purchase order of goods prior to taking out. These are all prior to taking out the loan, pursuant maybe at a contract, those types of things. And then there's also the supplier cost of perishable goods, and that can be costs that were either incurred before and or during the life of the loan. So that's something to keep in mind. And most all businesses have had the new expense of the PPE for worker protection. So that would cover your hand sanitizers, face mask, maybe plexiglass you had to install in your business, those types of expenses. So next slide, please. Here's the basic timeline on this. You can, as soon as your covered period is over and you're ready to go, you can go ahead and submit your application. Then if maybe you're just really busy and you can't get around to it right away, which is understandable, the thing I think I want to point out here is that you have up to 10 months from the end of your covered period to, of course, apply for forgiveness. If you still don't get around to it and 10 months have passed, then the banks or financial institutions are required to then begin to charge you P&I, principal and interest payments on your loan, because this is what you have is a loan. With all that said, as long as you have your application in prior to 10 months, whether your loan's been forgiven or not, as long as your application is in at the financial institution where you took out the PPP loan, your payments will not begin until after forgiveness if there's a remaining balance. Now, one other caveat to this is you technically have the whole term of your loan to apply. So if your PPP loan was prior to June 5th, it had a 2-year term. After June 5th, and this would of course include the whole new wave of PPP loans, all have a 5-year term. So you technically could go the entire 5 years. We don't suggest that, and we certainly think you should, get it in as soon as you're covered, as soon as you can after your covered period is over. So now you have submitted it. Most financial institutions have their own portal that they will, you watch your emails. They've all sent out instructions and details, and you will go into their portal, fill out your application. If you have to supply any additional documentation, you'll upload it all, send it in. Lending institutions have 60 days to get their review done and get your application to SBA, and then SBA has up to 90 days to review and make their decision. Next slide, please.
Karen, before you go any further, I'd like to let everybody know that a copy of this presentation will be forwarded to all attendees. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. So how do your lenders, what is their decision process and how are they going to look at it? Well, your lenders are going to have exactly 4 choices. They are either going to look over your forgiveness application. They're going to see the amount that you've requested for forgiveness, the amount that your loan was originally for, and hopefully approve it all in full. The other situation could.
So the lender has 4 forgiveness decision options. The first is approved in full. The second is approved in part. The third is denied, and then denied with prejudice. So ideally, your loan this time around, the lender will submit all the documentation to the SBA. Then the SBA will send out the loan. So just please, the loan number. It's not an instant situation because now they're doing data validation. Just be patient and have that constant communication with the lender. Sometimes it could have been as easy that they're getting a hold on it, that maybe the EIN was typed in wrong. Just constant communication with the lender to see what documents you are required to have is extremely important in this case, because it could have been a simple data entry error that can be fixed quickly. So just constantly keep up with your lender to get past these forgiveness decisions to get the full approval of your loan. Next slide, please. So there's 3 paths to loan forgiveness. These are forms 3508S, which is for loans typically under 150,000. Then you have the 3508 Easy, which is loans for over 150,000 with no reductions in FTEs. FTEs are full-time equivalents, wage reductions of over 25%. And then you have the form 3508 long form. If you're not eligible for the short form, that's if you had FTE reductions of over 25% and or salary reductions as well. Now, these are just the forms that can be used as a guide that are on the SBA website. However, most of the lenders will have a portal on their websites that will use the same information. So just make sure to go on the lender's website under their portal, because that's what most of them are using. Next slide, please. So what are the documents that are required for borrowers? In addition to a loan forgiveness application, borrowers are generally expected to submit the following: proof of payroll payment, non-proof of obligation and payments, 3508 Easy only FTE information if applicable. So that's the full-time equivalent employees, and 3508 only PPP. The Schedule A, that's where you're going to list all the employee salary and all your employees. It's just an itemized spreadsheet. Next slide, please. So borrower payroll documents must be provided proof of eligible costs, bank statements or third-party service payroll providers, tax forms, payment receipts. These are all the documents that must be provided. However, since it is the lender's loan, they may ask for more documents than this, or they may ask for clarifications over this because it is the lender's loan as well. Just keep that in mind. Next slide, please. So payroll compensation limits to the owner. So it's 2.5 months worth of the salary for 2019 or 2020 net profit for a 24 covered week period, or 8 weeks for 2019, 2020 profit for up to $15,385. Health benefits contributions made on behalf of self-employed individuals, general partners, and owners of S corporations are not eligible for forgiveness. Health insurance contributions made on behalf of C Corp owners are eligible for forgiveness. Retirement benefits loan forgiveness is not available for retirement contributions made on behalf of the self-employed individuals or general partners. Next slide, please. The payroll compensation limits for the employees is it's payroll costs, including salary, wages, and tips of up to $100,000 annualized per employee. For the 24 weeks for the employee, you can use up to $46,154. For the 8 weeks, you can use the $15,385. Now, if you're in between the covered week periods, let's say you used all the money in 10 weeks, then you would on your documentation, you would just select the 24-week covered period. Additionally, you don't have to wait those 24 weeks to submit for forgiveness. Once you use the money, it is highly suggested that you just start submitting your forgiveness application to the lender. So next slide, please. Borrower documentation of non-payroll. So this is business mortgage interest payments, amortization schedules, and receipts. So this is like your proof of obligation before February 15th, 2020. Now the business mortgage interest, that's what will be forgiven on that, not the full mortgage payment, just the interest. Then business rent or lease payments, business utility payments, invoices, and paid during the covered period and receipts. Next slide, please. So how PPP forgiveness is reduced: not spent on qualifying costs. More than 40% of payroll must be spent on non-payroll costs. Funds not used during the covered period. Decrease in full-time employees or FTEs. Headcounts not eligible for FTE exception or FTE safe harbor. What is meant by the FTE safe harbor means if you lost that employee because that employee went on unemployment, quit, or was gone for cause, that won't count against you. So for example, if you had a restaurant and the person resigned or they were able to get more unemployment benefits than they were working, that's no fault of the business owner. So you would be eligible for that safe harbor so that you wouldn't be penalized. The other situation where the reduction can be decreased is decrease of salary wages by more than 25% for any employee that made less than 100,000. Next slide, please. So change of ownership PPP loans. There's the SBA procedural notice. What is key there is you must notify your lender that the change of ownership happened, because there's a certain documentation that will need to take place. This next slide, please. So here's the links of all the resources that you can find on our SBA PPP website. Next slide, please. This concludes the presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Mike.
All right, thank you so much, Walter. And let's go ahead and turn to some of the questions in the Q&A box. And folks, if you do have any questions, please make sure to use the Q&A box provided. We're not going to be taking any questions over the phone. So the first question is, lots of questions about operating expenses that qualify. Is it only software? How about things like accounting invoices from a CPA firm, or legal bills, or HR consulting? Karen, would you like to address that?
Sure. For now, I would stick to exactly what we mentioned on the slide, and also, and I'm sorry I've been cutting off a lot today. What I would also recommend, and I would have said it if I had gotten to the next slide, is on these 3 forms that you get to choose, there are excellent instructions. I just reread over all the instructions for the 3508S this morning, and they give you very detailed explanations too. So out of the ones you mentioned, the software costs for sure. The other 2 you mentioned, I wouldn't be positive on those. And you may also have to see what your lending institution is comfortable with too.
Yeah, Karen, if I can piggyback onto that, remember it's called the Paycheck Protection Program. At least 60% has been used for payroll. So really the focus is to save jobs. The other 40% can be used, as they mentioned, mortgage interest, rent, transportation, utilities, and some of the 2 new categories that have been added. The cost of sort of retooling your business to become COVID compliant, or the cost of personal protective equipment is one. The second new category is if your business incurred damage as a result of some of the civil unrest, and that damage is not coverable by insurance, you can fold that into the mix. But apart from those 3, 4, or 5 exceptions, generally we want to be this, we want this to be, a paycheck protection program. So the other things like legal bills, CPA bills, really are sort of getting a little bit more outside the framework. Now, that said, if you do need working capital assistance for things like that, there's the economic injury disaster loan, and that is available until December 31st. So next question I have is, for self-employed, do we need to withdraw over the covered period at the rate of 2.5 months that was used to calculate the loan amount, or can we use the loan amount in one withdrawal? Walter, how about you take that one?
You can use the loan amount in one with, you would have to do it for the 8-week covered period. So most banks, most lending institutions, what they're doing is, since you're paying yourself and if you don't have any employees, then you could do it in one withdrawal as well. What we're really trying to do is just have a documentation that the employees were paid.
Okay, great. Thank you, Walter. Next question is, I use 100% of the PPP proceeds, but my bank does have a place for me to request my forgiveness. What options do I have? I think maybe you meant to say my bank does not have a place for me to request my forgiveness. What options do I have? Well, you really do need to work through your lender of account. And it could be that your lender has not yet been ready to accept forgiveness because maybe they were waiting for a blanket forgiveness thing for 150 and below, which was talked about in Congress. But you would need to work through your lender of account to initiate the forgiveness process, depending upon whether or not they're able. And most of them do have online avenues for that. Karen, Walter, anything to add, or is that fine?
That's totally correct, Mike. The only thing I was going to add is to really watch your emails for correspondence from your lending institution that you received your PPP loan from. And if you're not seeing them, please check your spam and your junk email, because it's very important that you keep up with what they're sending out. Yeah, and they have good websites too.
Yeah. Next question is kind of related to that. What if your financial institution is not accepting applications for forgiveness? I would say yet. How does that affect the 10-month timeline? Karen?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I actually contemplated that myself. While I was going over all of this morning. Honestly, I would say if any lending institutions up to this point have not, they most likely will be opening the floodgates any day now, because this new 150,000 and under application is up and running, and that did stall certain institutions for good reason, really, because it's a wonderful application, forgiveness application.
Yeah, that's a good point, Karen. That's exactly why so many lenders have delayed through the latter part of last year up till January, because they were waiting for the 150,000 Streamline form, which is now out. But also they were kind of reluctant based on those rumors about potential blanket forgiveness. Karen?
Yeah, one other point too is get prepared. I mean, right now, even if if they're not accepting this second, get everything prepared, everything that we covered in the slides, and read the applications, figure out, well, if you're 150 or under, which application for sure. But if you're over 150, can you do the easy, or do you need to do the 3508? Get everything in order. I almost want to call this sort of like a little research project. Have all your documentation, have everything set. And then as soon as it does open, you're ready to go. And once your application's in, as long as it's before the 10 months, you're fine. You're not going to have to start paying P&I.
Yeah,
I promise I'm done.
And
Yeah,
additionally on that note, most of the lenders, you cannot really log in and log off. Most of them, you have to do it at one setting. So just have all your documents there, or else you're going to have to start
Yeah.
over. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you. The next question is also related to this conversation. What if the bank is not accepting forgiveness applications and the business is over 10 months? In other words, the 10-month thing lapses. I think that's still a bit of ways, given the fact that this thing just opened in March. And bottom line is, no bank is going to want to, face the prospect of forcing you all to repay that loan, because no bank wants a 1% loan on their books, right? So,
Correct.
Karen, anything to add to that?
No, I agree. I think everybody is going to make that mark. If your bank or financial institution's one of the later ones to get on board, like I said, just be ready to put that in as soon as you can, and watch for those emails.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Some banks are not currently accepting applications for forgiveness as they are focusing on PPP second draw. What happens if the 10-month window ends while a portal for forgiveness is closed at the bank? And I think that's the same question.
We covered it. Correct.
Pretty much. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Do we have to submit the forgiveness application after the 8-week period, or can we submit right away once the funds are used, say in week 1?
I would answer that you need to wait for 8 weeks. Walter, what would your answer be?
Yeah, you would have to wait 8 weeks because they're going to
That's
take
what
that
I
8-week covered period.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. For sole proprietorships, what documents do they need to remit to prove their payments to themselves? That's a Walter question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sole proprietors, depending on how you're paying yourself. If you're paying yourself with a sole, if you're a sole proprietor, it just depends how you're paying yourself. They could be taking the net profit of it. It just depends how you're doing it on your taxes. It's going to really be the self-employed tax. So that's what it's going to be here, or the net profit. The proof would be that you use that payment and it was in your bank account as well. If you're a sole proprietor without any employees. Obviously, if you're a sole proprietor with employees, then you would have to prove the 941s that you actually paid your employees.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Walter. Next question. Are there similar policies for economic injury disaster loan, or EIDL, loan forgiveness? And the answer to that is no. EIDLs they're strictly loans. They are not forgivable. They're not grants, except for the targeted advance thing that we came up with last year. And also, as we heard during last week's session, there was a targeted advance program for that. But other than that, your EIDL is a direct loan from the SBA that must be repaid. Until such time as Congress enacts legislation, it is not to be forgiven. Next question. Many of the banks have paused taking forgiveness applications right now, and borrowers are facing their 10-month. Okay, I think we answered this one as well. My PPP loan is through American Express. I have requested the forgiveness application 4 times, and they keep telling me it's coming. Well, there's really not much control we have over their readiness to give you that application form, right?
Correct. Just keep working with them like you're doing.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. Which SBA document is best to explain the details of what is allowed to be claimed as operating expenses or supplier costs? Can you provide a link?
The best documentation for supplier costs?
I think that's one that they're specifically saying of what is allowed to be claimed as operating expenses or supplier costs. So yeah, they're specifically asking.
Yeah, and that again, I'm gonna have to have you really defer that to your you're probably gonna have to defer that to your lending institution for, just to make sure. I mean, we have it. I can go back over it from the slide and go over what it says, but and just every business, it's just different. If you really have those types of costs and expenses, then by all means, you can put in for them. By the time though, as Mike pointed out, you've used 60% towards your all your payroll and then lease payments and various things like that, there's probably not going to be a whole lot left in that category. So, but I'll get back with you on that. Let me see if I can get more detail, because I can tell that's a concern.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Karen. Next question. My lender does not have the forgiveness application posted yet for the PPP Round 1 loan. The site states the application will be posted soon. Is the new application now available for lenders to post?
Yes.
Yeah, this might be two different issues, what the lender has posted and what we have posted. But Karen?
Yes, I mean, the lenders can certainly post all these different applications, the frontline application to apply and forgiveness applications. They are all available. And they're all on our website, the sba.gov/PPP, and Treasury's website also.
Great,
Yeah, one thing, Karen, that you mentioned a minute ago is for people to go ahead and use the application for forgiveness that SBA has on their site to prepare while they're waiting for their lender. Is that correct?
I totally agree with that. I'm honestly, and you need, please take these whatever application you qualify to use for forgiveness, read it cover to cover. It's so detailed. It's very well written, very, very well written, and just get everything in order and be ready.
Yeah, thank you. Next question. What if a lender doesn't have a portal to submit the forgiveness forms? Yeah,
Walter, don't they all have to have some form of electronic way of submitting?
Some lenders could, I'd say over 95% of the lenders have an electronic way of submitting. That's probably the preferred way. If that lender for some reason doesn't have an electronic way of submitting, I would contact that local branch and they would tell you maybe you have to mail them in. Not sure how they're doing it, but most lenders have the portal up and running. What's having the issue with the forgiveness situation is because that new forgiveness application came out for 150,000 or below. They're trying to do the programming back end, so that's why it's taking a little longer to post it on their website.
You're right. Good point.
Yeah. The important thing is, folks, you do not apply to SBA for your forgiveness. You always work through your lender, whether that's online or snail mail or something else. Okay. Next question, can I submit 3508S to Amex if they don't provide a form? I don't want to miss my 10-month deadline, which is approaching soon. Yeah, Walter, I see you shaking your head.
You would have to wait for their link or their instructions, because most of it they're really working on the portal. And as our district director said, no lender wants to keep a 1% loan on their books. They want to forgive the loan. Nobody wants to collect on that. So patience.
Yeah. Next question, is there now a short form for loans under 150? It was originally for loans under 50.
No, it all fits under the 150 now.
Okay, so there's one form for loans 150 and below.
Correct.
Yeah, but they're asking, is there now a short form? I guess we did streamline it. Yeah.
That is yes, the 3508S, which is short, I assume is what the S stands for, or simplified, is it encompasses that one. So yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. Next question. What do we need to show for payroll for self-employed? And I think, Walter, you handled that earlier, right? For sole proprietorships and such.
Yeah. For the self-employed, if you don't have any borrowers, it would be line 30. It would be line 31 on your tax returns. It's that net profit that they're looking for there.
Okay.
Perfect.
Next question. What documentation is required for 3508S with loans over 150?
Well, over 150, you would not use the 3508S.
I'm sorry, Karen. Let me correct myself. For loans over 50,000.
Okay. So again, I think they're looking for, they need to use the 3508S form.
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's it. Okay.
Yeah, he did say what documentation is required for the 3508S. So he knows that he has to use the 3508S. What documentation does he need?
So again, when you're reading through this form, there's very little, almost there's really no upfront documentation you're going to be providing to your lender. You're going to be keeping it all in your file for up to 4 years because you could have a look back by SBA. With that said, if you're using the 3508S for your second draw loan and you didn't show before you kind of have the choice of, if your loan's under 150, in order to get the second draw, you have to be able to show that 25% reduction in your income. Now, many lenders are just going to tell you, even if it's 150 or under, they want to see that up front. They also technically could wait for you to submit that with forgiveness. So if you didn't submit that on the front end, that is one thing you will have to upload on the back end for a second draw, 150 and under. Everything else, just keep in your file.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Next question, would you please go back over the S Corp owner not being eligible? Walter, you want to take that one?
Sure. For the eligible expenses, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like the health.
In what cases is an S Corp not eligible?
They are.
I think is what they're saying.
They are eligible. It's just certain the S Corp owners cannot use the health benefits. It's on the slides there that it's covered there specifically, the health benefits.
Okay, thank you.
It's also on the application.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Next question, how would you recommend proceeding if you have used first round funds for forgivable expenses, but your lender has not yet opened the forgiveness application? Okay, I think we already talked about that. Just get ready, make sure your paperwork is in order, and when they do open up, you'll be good to go. Yep. Mm-hmm. Next question, for self-employed, i.e. no payroll costs, what will be used to show payroll, they're saying, meaning we don't get paid, we just draw as needed from net income. Yeah, Walter, what do you think?
Oh, if you don't have any employees on the self-employed side, you're really ideally paying yourself, so you're not going to short yourself. So all they're going to want to see is that check went into your bank account. That's really what the lender is going to see, and it's going to be on that net profit situation.
Okay.
On your tax returns.
On your tax returns.
On your tax returns.
Exactly. Line 31.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Good job, Mike.
Thank you. We had first round and was already forgiven. For round 2, what is the start date for available expenses and end date? Does the 8-week or 24-week need to be continuous? Yeah, first I would say anytime between 8 and 24 weeks would be your covered period. It's not either or. As to the second question, does that period need to be continuous? Well, yes, yeah. 9 weeks continuous, 23 weeks continuous, et cetera.
And it always starts from the date of your getting your loan. That's the beginning of your covered period. Now, then you run it for 8 weeks, 10 weeks, however many weeks moving forward.
Yeah, and when you say it starts when you get your loan, you mean it starts when the loan is first dispersed.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay. Will PPP2 forgiveness look back to 2019 employment levels in order to judge FTEs? Are there any rules that are different for PPP2 forgiveness than PPP1? So the first part is, will second draw PPP forgiveness look back to 2019 employment levels in order to judge FTEs?
Walter?
It is really when you're taking the second, when you're calculating the second PPP loan amount. So for example, they're going to, obviously your first draw PPP period. So it just depends when they're calculating it or how long you have the employees for. So it just really depends. So if you were doing 2019, then it would be from that 2019, that look back, depending on what your look back is going to be at. That's when they're calculating the employee levels to justify that amount. The key there with the second draw PPP loan, the best method is try to go to the lender that did your first draw PPP loan, because they have certain information, or else you're going to have to do a lot of lead work between lender 1 and lender 2, that they'll need certain information from each other. And the main key to that is the 25% of gross receipts reduction. And that's based on corresponding quarter to quarter or tax year. So for example, Q1 2019, Q1 2020, you can't intermix the quarters.
Okay, thank you. Next question, if we get a second PPP, is the forgiveness application separate from the first one?
Yes, you'd file an application separately.
Yeah. Next question, if an employee resigns versus is terminated, does this affect your employee count? Walter?
No, it does not affect your employee count, because that's covered under the Safe Harbor Act.
Yeah, the Safe Harbor portion of PPP.
Of PPP, yes.
Thank you. Okay, next question, can you expand on the change of ownership rule with funding? How does this affect PPP loan round 2 in 2021? Okay.
Well, I don't know if I know exactly what part of the change of ownership question that they're asking. I mean, the key with a change of ownership is that the seller of a business that has the PPP loan has notified SBA, told them they're selling the business, potentially will probably have to set up an escrow account if in fact the loan has not yet been forgiven. And then they're specifically asking how it's going to affect their second PPP loan. And I think that what they're saying is, can they do the look back from maybe the seller, say they bought it in 2020, can they do the look back with the seller's revenue to show the 25%, and they will be able to do that. That's one of the Q&As. So I think that's where they're going. Sorry, it took me a minute.
I think so. I think that's exactly where they were going with that. Next question. Okay, thank you. Are there any differences between round 1 forgiveness and round 2 forgiveness at this time? Do you expect any changes to this current round of forgiveness? And I think we already kind of hinted at that. I mean, you need to submit 2 different forgiveness applications for your round 2 versus round 1. I think one of the things that we are seeing, though, is remember, this time around with PPP round 2 is that we've added the new categories of expenses that are eligible for forgiveness, the one including personal protective equipment and the one including damage as a result of civil unrest. If you have not gotten your first draw PPP loan forgiven yet, key point, you can include those new categories, for those loans that have yet to be forgiven.
Good point.
So that I think would be one of the big changes, between if you got your first draw already forgiven and, forgiveness going forward. Next question, is the SBA on average taking the full 90 days for forgiveness? Yeah, we really don't track. We cannot track in the district office the time frame, but what the time frame exactly as to how long these things are taking. But Karen, what are your thoughts on that? Are you hearing anything?
I would say there are the rare few cases where a loan has gone over 90, but that's very rare. I think the turnaround time, the lenders have been pretty pleased with how quickly SBA has been able to turn them around.
Okay, that's good to hear. Yeah, which means it must be pretty quick if the lender's pretty pleased.
Yes.
Yeah, next question is is there a certain amount you have to pay your employee that is acceptable for forgiveness?
I don't believe so.
You can't reduce the certain amount. It would be based off your 941s that you did for the. So if that employee was getting paid for that 2-month salary, $2,000 a month, then you would have to pay them that same amount, because that's what your loan amount is calculated for.
Yeah.
Good point.
Now there is, now that said, there is a certain amount that is not acceptable for forgiveness.
Yeah.
And that amount happens to be any excess over 100,000, right?
Yes.
On kind of a
Correct.
prorated
Yes.
basis. Okay, so that would be the limitation there. Next question, do you have a list of financial institutions in North Carolina that are participating in this latest round of the PPP? And two thoughts on that. One is it's a very good idea to go with whatever bank has your, accounts, check, even if it's just a checking account
And your
or a
first draw.
savings account. If this is going to be your first time, if this is going to be your second draw, it would really be a great idea to go back to your first draw PPP lender because they already have a file on you. Now, failing that, there is the sba.gov/lender match that is available to you, sba.gov/lender match. And there you can locate lenders that might be willing to consider your PPP loan, depending upon where you happen to be located and what lenders are willing to serve that area.
Correct.
Next question. What is the URL site that we should start at? As Karen mentioned, sba.gov/PPP. You can find information on first draw loans, second draw loans, forgiveness, and other things as well. Next question for a one-person's.
I was going to say, and there's lots of reading material if you have time to read on that site.
Yeah, indeed. Next question, if the SBA paid the interest on the mortgage during the covered period, can the business owner still use this as interest paid and submit for forgiveness? I am talking about SBA guaranteed loans.
7A, I mean, is that
Yeah.
are we confusing the payments that are being made on 7A loans by SBA? I'm a little confused on that one, Mike.
I think that's what he wants clarity on. So he's got an existing SBA guaranteed loan. Remember, we did the 11-12 debt relief where we paid 6 months of that sort of thing. And now he's asking, okay, I got the 6 months debt release. How about if I use that mortgage interest paid for forgiveness for my PPP loan? And the first, well, I was going to say first thing, it has to be business mortgage, but I see that he already listed that. So what are your thoughts on that, Karen?
I would say no, they didn't make that. That wasn't an expense of theirs. If those were the payments that were being paid by SBA, those were not there. They didn't have that expense. So I would say my assumption would be no.
Yeah, thank you. Did I hear S Corp owners' salaries are not forgiven? Please clarify, thank you. Walter?
The salaries are forgiven. It's just certain benefits that will be on the PowerPoint. That's there. It clearly states what is like the health benefits and things of that nature in the 401k, but it's going to be on the slide deck specifically what is.
Great, thank you. Next question, I have an Airbnb. The revenue increased during COVID-19. However, I lost my stable income outside of my Airbnb. Would I qualify for PPP? Yeah, Karen, I see you shaking your head.
No, I'm not thinking that one's going to qualify. I saw Eileen shaking her head too. I wonder if she's run into that question before.
Yeah. Eileen, do you have any commentary on that?
Take yourself off of mute. Yeah.
The person who asked the question is saying they lost their outside job, which has nothing to do with the income generating business.
Good point. Thank you, Eileen. Yeah. Next question, can you address the 10-month time to submit the forgiveness application? Well, actually 10 months relates to the grace period within which you don't get to pay anything back on the PPP. So that's kind of a separate issue from the forgiveness application, which as soon as you've paid out through the covered period, technically you can submit your forgiveness application right after that, right, Karen?
As soon as your covered period is over, you can submit your forgiveness application, correct?
Yeah. And it sounds like they're saying, oh, it sounds like they're inferring that I have 10 months within which to do that forgiveness, which is not really the case.
No,
right?
It's within 10 months from when your covered period ended as to when, if you have not submitted your forgiveness application, that P&I payments will begin on your loan.
Yeah, that just means that payments kick in after 10 months.
Correct,
That's
correct.
kind of a separate issue from the forgiveness.
Right, but it's not a
process.
deadline. It's, I mean,
Yeah.
it should be kind of a
Yeah.
personal deadline because who wants to start making those
Yeah.
payments? But it's not a, you have to do it kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and my guess is before that loan billing statement kicks in with your P&I payments, my guess is before that gets sent out, your lender is most likely going to be knocking on your door saying, where's your forgiveness form?
Exactly. Where are they? Right.
Yeah. Like I said, lenders are not going to want to get stuck with a 1-year loan over, what is it, 2 years, 5 years? I think it's 2 years.
5, depending on when it was approved. Correct.
Right, yeah. Next question, if you can choose your forgiveness period, does the length of time you choose affect the amount you can borrow? Yeah. What do you think, Walter?
No, because it's based on your payrolls at 2.5 times the payroll. That has nothing to do with the amount of borrowing.
Yeah.
Calculation.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. On the slide for retirement benefits, will that amount pertain to S corps for forgiveness? And I think, Walter, we kind of touched on this already, but it's talking about retirement benefits actually. What do you think?
For the owners, the retirement benefits will not count. It counts for the employees, but also just refer back to the forgiveness application. Is very thorough, and additionally to the slide date.
Yeah, great, thank you, Walter. Next question, if a lender denies a PPP forgiveness application in any manner, full, partial, etc., is there an appeal process if it is felt that it is unwarranted, meaning that the proper documentation was provided and all criteria were met? So they're asking, hey, if I get denied in full or in part, what recourse do I have? Does SBA perhaps have any sort of avenue through which they can appeal? Karen?
They can, the borrower can certainly go to their lender, and the lender can send it to SBA for SBA to decision whether they're going to review it or not. It's not a definite that SBA is going to review those situations. The real appeal process that's in place has to do with when SBA has determined your loan ineligible or something along those lines, that SBA is denying the whole forgiveness. That's really, I think, when we think of the appeal process, it's more to do with that.
Yeah.
But lenders can submit to have it reviewed.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Walter, did you want to add something to that?
And like we said, the lender doesn't want to be stuck with that 1% loan. So if it fits the guidelines, they really are going to forgive it. I mean, they're going to really work with you too.
Mm-hmm. To get additional information or whatever they need. Correct. Good point.
Okay, thank you, Walter. Next question, how do we get these presentation slides? I missed the websites you had given. Yeah, the slides are going to be posted together with a recording of this session on the Sbtdc's website at sbtdc.org. Next question, what is the process if our bank hasn't opened forgiveness yet? And I think I kind of alluded to that already, okay? Next question, do paycheck costs include employer payroll taxes paid? Walter?
Employer, on the left side, on the employer, no. So that wouldn't be included on that side, not on the taxes.
Okay, thank you. Next question, I have received a portion of the loan forgiveness from my lender. However, they reduced it by the initial advance. How do I apply to get the advance amount back too? What is the process? Oh, very good question, because as a result of the Economic Aid Act, we're saying SBA is no longer requiring that idle advance be deducted. And what was happening is that left like a small loan balance that small businesses had to repay back to the bank. So here's the thing on that. Borrower, you do not need to do anything. Don't worry about applying or anything, because the SBA already has a record of those folks who deducted the idle advance. And what happens is, if that was already deducted and you've got a small loan balance outstanding at your bank, SBA is going to wire the funds to the bank to pay off that loan amount. They're not going to wire the funds to you to be reimbursed. They're going to pay off that account. So don't do anything. SBA will go ahead and wire those funds into your account. Sorry, into the bank's account for your benefit, I should say.
You're right.
Sorry?
You're right.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. Next question, can you speak to the ERTC as it relates to the PPP, or perhaps have an upcoming webinar on the topic? You know, that's real interesting because I just did a webinar with a CPA who was talking about the employee retention tax credit thing. That's kind of beyond the scope of what we're covering, which is just PPP forgiveness. But I will say this, and let me just sort of test my bad memory. You can Google this on IRS, by the way, but I believe how it goes is if you're using a certain wage amount to justify your ERTC, you cannot also use that same as the basis for your getting forgiveness because it's like double dipping. I would advise you to go to irs.gov and see on just that one issue because we're not ERTC experts, but that part I do remember from our webinar. And maybe I'll have Bob follow up on the particulars of that. It is 9:57, y'all, and I do need to go to a 10 o'clock appointment. However, Eileen Joyce has graciously agreed to step in and continue to moderate for the next couple of minutes because we do have lots of questions and we want to be as responsive as possible. It's just that I need to drop off. So Eileen, if you wouldn't mind coming on and taking over, that would be great.
I'm ready.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Mike.
Bob, can we stop the questions being put into the Q&A box? Because every time one goes in, my feed jumps around. Is that possible?
Yeah. Actually, no.
Okay. So please don't add any more additional questions because every time a question gets in, the listing jumps around. So our next question is, I have purchased a business in mid-2020 that carried a PPP loan and has been badly impacted by COVID-19. I am not aware of the seller's communication with the lender at the time of transaction. What steps should we take at this point to resolve in order to pursue forgiveness? Karen?
Okay, tell me the date again. What was the date?
Mid-2020. And it had a PPP loan.
Okay. The biggest thing I can say, so so the seller technically is still the one, I think it's the buyer that's asking this question to you from what I can gather. So
Correct.
The seller is still the one responsible for applying for forgiveness in these situations. So twofold, definitely the seller needs to work with the original PPP borrower. And, they're going to need to notify SBA that this business was sold and a few more things like that. But that is who took the loan out, and that is who should be applying for forgiveness.
Thank you.
They're not the easiest situations to deal with.
No.
And that's why we put that notice also towards the end of the presentation. So.
Okay. We are in a high turnover industry, and many of our employees declined our offers to return to work or they voluntarily quit. So using the FTE exceptions, we would still get full forgiveness. But later in the year, business picked up and we hired several new employees. Does that impact our FTE exceptions and reduce the amount we get forgiven? Walter?
You're on mute, Walter.
No, it does not. It does not impact it because that they left voluntary. So if you hired more people, it wouldn't affect the amount. I mean, you could actually use the salaries that were outstanding over for those people that left. If you hired them back, if you hired new people, then that would be okay. You could actually use that to pay your new people as well.
Thank you.
Good.
If you didn't apply for the first PPP, can you still apply for that one? And the answer to that is yes. That's called PPP First Draw. It's on our website, and you just would need to work with the lender that you currently do business with, or many other lenders out there that are willing to do PPP loans. Mm-hmm. Next question. Our lender has put all forgiveness applications on hold. Okay, we've already discussed that. How do nonprofits calculate loss of revenue if they are new and are down 90% donation based on this time. This is also a nonprofit that started towards the end of 2019, so they don't have 2019 for comparison. Walter,
Did they already apply for the first drop? Do they already have a PPP loan?
The way doesn't sound like they have.
So it wouldn't. When did they get the?
They didn't say.
But
Yeah.
they said 2019, so they were in business by February 15th of 2020. And and if they're not getting a second draw, I think they should be fine to apply, right, Walter?
Yeah, they would. They would be fine to apply for their net if they didn't get a second draw, then they would just be going off a first draw situation. So you wouldn't take into account the gross receipts. You would actually just use the payroll that you're paying your employees on the nonprofit side.
Okay. That's a little complicated one.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. For PPP number 2, qualification, the rule says must have already spent PPP 1 on qualified expenses, quote unquote. Some businesses are still closed, so they have no payroll. Can they spend PPP 1 on rent and utilities and still get qualified for PPP number 2?
No.
And that, according to Walter, is a no because he is shaking his head. And so is Karen. All right.
60%.
That's right. The goal is to keep your people on payroll even if you were closed. So there's that. If you are a sole proprietor and you are commission only, how do you show the loss of income during the covered period? Anybody want to take a stab at that one? Okay, the person who asked this question, please send us an email at nc@sba.gov and we will look that up. The next question. Okay, we are not going to answer questions about the shuttered venue program. The Sbtdc may do a program on that in the next couple of weeks. So we are not prepared to talk about that today. Sorry. Next question. If your FTE went down, but you use 100% of your PPP on payroll, could you use 3508EZ?
What was that again? I'm sorry.
If you're full-time equivalent employees, okay, somebody just asked a question and my screen popped around. If your FTE went, yes.
I was gonna read the question for you.
No, I don't know why it's doing that. If your FTE went down, but you use 100% of your PPP on payroll, would you use the 3508EZ?
Only if my loan was oh, I see. Payroll went down. Is the loan over 150? If the loan's still under 150, you would still use the 3508S. You would consider using the EZ if your loan was over 150 and payroll went down. Right, Walter?
All right.
Yes.
Okay. For a 2-person S Corp that experienced a loss over calendar year 2020 and no 940s, and no, not what, okay. This person needs to email nc@sba.gov. Thank you. And this is from our Women's Business Center in Fayetteville. Can you explain the refinance, quote unquote, language for those that received EIDL and are now going to take a first PPP request?
Is that where are they going? Is where they're going? Does that have to do with the fact that we're no longer taking those advances off of PPP? I'm not quite sure.
I think there's some language in the PPP about refinancing your EIDL.
Oh, that's a date thing. That's only if it was approved, and I would have to look that up.
April
So
3rd.
prior to April 3rd, and
3rd.
honestly, very few
Yeah.
idols were already approved prior to April 3rd. That is the only time.
All right, great, thank you. Okay, this is a long question. On second round PPP, our main business was reduced 34% second quarter to second quarter.
Mhm.
When I apply, I am asked to include other businesses which I own in the calculation. When I do that, the amount becomes 19% quarter to quarter. All our businesses have their own EIN numbers and staff. Very unfair how one business may qualify for second quarter if unrelated businesses did not suffer. Any suggestions?
That's the affiliation rule, is where that's tying in, that they do have to include, if you have, you know, control and majority ownership or / control, it might not be over 51% ownership, but you still have control in various other businesses that are considered affiliates. Yes, they do have to be included.
So the answer is he cannot apply. Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. He can certainly work with his lender. I mean,
You
know,
try.
he can try, right?
I am the owner of a small business who files as an S corp, and I pay myself as the only employee. I file a 941, get a W-2, etc. So how do I calculate the payroll expense?
Walter.
Yeah, so if you're filing the payroll expense, are you saying the payroll, like the pay, how you so you would take
Did he say only him, Eileen, or did he say he has
He's the
other
only
employees?
employee.
He
The
is.
only employee. Would you just not take the amount paid yourself for the entire year and divide by 52?
you would divide it by 12 and then multiply it by 2.5 times from the W-2 if that's the way he's paying himself.
Okay. First round PPP, I received $153,471. What form do I use for forgiveness?
300 or 300,000?
153,000, just over 150.
They need to try to use the EZ. Try to use the 3508 EZ if you fit the categories. If not, you're using the 3508.
Okay, where can I get more information as to the use of funds for health or retirement benefits paid on behalf of employees?
For employees, those would
Mhm.
actually be covered expenses. It's for the owners that is usually not covered. And there's certain situations where the owners are covered, but you can look at our slide deck. It specifically clearly says which ones are.
And we will be sending that slide deck to everybody who registered. And please stop.
Go to your application.
Yes.
Very, very, very detailed and spelled out.
And please stop asking more questions because I lost my spot again.
Well, I have something I'll read while you're quickly
Okay.
doing that, Eileen.
Thanks,
because
Karen.
There were a lot of people, several people asking about the covered supplier costs, which, you know, that's a new expense for all of us too. So we're learning that right along with all of you. But it says on the 3508S application that these expenditures made to a supplier of goods for the supply of goods that are essential to the operation of the borrower at the time at which the expenditure is made and made pursuant to a contract, order, or purchase order in effect prior to the beginning of the covered period. So that's important right there. Then it goes on to say for perishable goods, the contract, order, or purchase order may have been in effect before or at any time during the covered period. So they are distinguishing perishable goods versus other essential goods for the operation. So that may help a little bit for some previous questions.
Okay. Okay, we asked that one. We've already answered that one. Please define continuous. Does that mean that in a 24-week payroll period must have been maintained that entire time, or just that the funds were based on 2.5? Okay, this is confusing. Let's do this again. Please define continuous. Does that mean that in a 24-week period, payroll must have been maintained that entire time, or just that the funds were used during that time?
You could have used the funds anywhere from 8 weeks to 24 weeks. So you could have used them in 10 weeks. Does
Okay.
not mean you have to have waited, the entire 24 weeks.
My
People
lender said
sometimes
that they
need the 24 weeks to be able to make the 60% for their payroll. That's why you would extend that long.
Okay. My lender said that they submitted my first round for full forgiveness to SBA. Can I assume that SBA will forgive the loan?
Well, sure, we can always assume, right? I mean, I'm not trying to make a joke out of that, but we don't know. I mean, the lenders doesn't know, and we wouldn't know until the final review has been completed, but hopefully you will get your full forgiveness.
As long as you
Okay,
follow all the
this is-
guidelines, you should be able to be forgiven. I mean,
Correct.
You just have to follow all the guidelines on the filing forms. If you use the PPP loan for what it's intended for, you should be forgiven.
Correct.
All right, here's a good question. My institution advised waiting until March to apply for the PPP loan because of more information coming from SBA to simplify and streamline the process. I'm wondering, is this for forgiveness or to apply? It says apply for the loan. Is the info you are going through today what they are referring to, or is there more to come in March? I would apply for a PPP loan as soon as possible.
We run out the end of March. We run out March 31st. So we've got the newest set of all the application and forms, application forms, forgiveness forms. They are all loaded on our website. So no, if you're applying to get the loans, get your application in. We're all getting tongue-tied.
A lot of duplicate questions that I'm scrolling through.
But they're really good questions.
They are good questions. Is this the proper place to submit a question to be answered? Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, you are answering the right place. The 10-month grace period begins at the end of the covered period.
No, the 10-month grace period begins, is that what they said? It begins at the end of the covered period. Then you start counting month 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
up to 10.
So when you go to your bank, do you ask for a PPP loan? And if so, will they know what it is? Oh, they all know what it is. Every banker in the country.
They sure should know by now.
They may not want to know.
If they don't know, then really, truly, they're probably not actively lending in the PPP program. And there are
Correct.
lending institutions that are not making PPP, but a lot of them are. So.
And may I make a suggestion? Talk to your friends who are business owners. Who are they using? What was their experience? Was it a good experience? How did the forgiveness application go the first time? I mean, those are really important questions, and why networking is so important.
Yeah, just excuse me. Just a quick clarification. The grace period, did you say, I wasn't sure, does it begin when the funds are dispersed or at the end of the covered period?
End of the covered period. End of the cover. You've used your funds up. Now, if you get your application in within 10 months after you've used your funds up, you will, hopefully not have to ever see a payment, because hopefully I'll get forgiven.
Okay. I am a sole. Okay, stop putting questions in the box. I don't know why it jumps around, but it just jumps all the way to the bottom. No more questions, please. All right. Somebody's question was that they're a sole proprietor and their profit is their salary, basically. Are they eligible for PPP?
Walter, isn't that one we've already covered? Doesn't that go back to the line 31, et cetera?
Yeah, it really depends how they're filing their taxes and how they're paying themselves. So it would either be line 31, on your net profit.
Okay.
And that's a good one too. Like Karen said, if you go to the actual application form, it's really clear. It tells you if you're a sole proprietor, or if you're a LLC, and you're treated like a sole proprietor. It really kind of explains that pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, these are great questions, but we're just going to constantly keep harping back to you to go through these applications. Front end, brand new loan, or forgiveness. Either way, they're really well done.
Okay, here's a really interesting comment. I just got in the mail a principal and interest statement from my local bank, which I have been waiting for them to open up the forgiveness link again. I feel that they may want to take my 1%. What should I do, as I have been emailing my banker to ask, when will the link open up? It has been closed since Thanksgiving. He doesn't know.
No,
what does he do?
No banker wants to keep a loan for 1% interest. They're losing money on that for the servicing of it. They're really trying to forgive that loan. Their portals just may not be open. Just keep constantly looking at the links, because some bankers are just sending the links out to them, or call the lending institution up. But SBA doesn't have any control over that. We can't make them open the portal.
And the only thing I would add to that, because Walter and I have been dealt with this earlier this week, is many of the financial institutions involved in PPP are using outside services. There's a whole bunch of them to help them with their portal and getting these loans in and everything. And some of those systems are taking a few more days to get these new forms all uploaded and in. So I have lenders that are really anxious to get your applications. They're just waiting for their back end to be able to take them.
Okay, and this is the very last question. I received the first PPP loan using, I'm sorry, let me restart this over again. I received the first PPP loan with the subcontractor payments that I made. These are not payroll payments. What happened with the forgiveness process in this case? I don't think you're going to get forgiven, because this is for W-2 employees.
Mm-hmm.
So if you try to use contractors, you will have a 1% loan.
Or adjusted, depending on if there were other salary employees also.
Correct.
Those will
Correct.
get covered. So it may be an adjusted amount.
Any final comments, Karen?
No, I think it went well, and we're all here. Sbtdc resource partners, we're all here to help everybody.
Yep.
We're learning it right along with all of you too.
So back over to Bob. Bob, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. It's great, and I am putting up the last slide from the presentation, which gives the SBA.gov office locations, so you can look there at the District NC/NC-Charlotte. If you need to get in touch with the SBA, or just email nc.sba.gov. I think that goes there too. I'd like to thank you all for attending, and have a special thanks to all of our SBA resource partners. Visit www.sba.gov/NC for information on how to reach these partners, which include the Sbtdc, the Women's Business Centers. There's 4 of them, about to be 5. One at our host campus at Winston-Salem State University will be opening up soon. SCORE, the Veterans Business Opportunity Centers, and also thanks to our 58 North Carolina community colleges, the Small Business Center Network, which partners with us and has helped promote this webinar series. Our next webinar in the series will cover, we are going to do a webinar on the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, SVOG. The date for that is to be announced. We'll also have other webinars coming up in the series, and I encourage you to monitor the sbtdc.org/coronavirus website and click on the webinars tab to see these upcoming webinars. They'll also be posted on social media and email. We send email blasts out to people that have participated in previous webinars. The recording and slides for this webinar will be posted at www.sbtdc.org, and there's a long address there. You can get /coronavirus/webinars.html, or if you click on the Navigating Your Business Through COVID-19 banner at the top of the page and just go down and click on the webinars button, then it'll take you to the recordings and also the schedule when we get them posted of the upcoming webinars. If you'd like to make a virtual appointment with an Sbtdc Business Resiliency Counselor, you can just go to www.sbtdc.org/ERFC and just put your email address in there, and whether you're a current client or not, that will allow you to put in the special assistance requested, just put in Business Resiliency Counselor or BRC, and they'll get in touch with you. Again, thanks to the SBA NC District Office and all our SBA partner organizations and the Community College Network, SBCN Network, for their support. I'd also like to say a special thanks to a couple of people, of course, our presenters, but Eileen Joyce, the Senior Economic Development Officer at the Charlotte office, has been just a great help in putting this series together. And also Catherine Katz, our Business Resiliency Program Coordinator at NC State with the Sbtdc, has been a great help. The Sbtdc is administered statewide by North Carolina State University on behalf of the University of North Carolina system, and is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. Thank you for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.